Batu, Barada, Nikto.
You must remember those words.
Gordon's alive.
You know what the Turing test is?
I know Kung Fu.
Dead or alive, you are coming with me.
My God, it's full of stars.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Stories Out of Time and Space. As we travel around in our TARDIS, we are moving our way through the Doctors, and we've reached Doctor 1.5. We're going to be talking about Peter Cushing and the movie Doctor from the 60s. And we're going to be talking about the second of the films, Daleks' Invasion of Earth 2150, or just Doctor Who and the Invasion of Earth. This was released in 1966 and is a movie adaptation of one of the first Doctor stories. So, Julian, what were your initial thoughts and knowledge of this film?
Magnets. It's all done with magnets.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of the first two Dalek serials on the original show, and at the time, Dalek mania took over Britain, and there were Dalek toys and Dalek puppets and everything with Daleks, and there was talk about a Dalek separate spin-off TV series at one point. Which I would have loved. I don't know what the plot would have possibly been, but so I find both of these films quite watchable. I don't know when I became aware of them, but I watched them relatively early in my sort of deep dive into Doctor Who, and enjoyed them. What about you?
Yeah, the both this and the first one are ones that sort of I remember as a kid being on like a Sunday afternoon. Like there was that thing of like, whatever channel it was would have those sort of like Sunday afternoon films. They're always older films. They were always sort of like films from British 60s films seem to fill up Sunday afternoons. And this is one of those ones I'm like, I know it. And again, watching it this time, I'm like, I have like memories of seeing this as a kid on like BBC Two, but like never sort of going, oh yeah, that's a Doctor Who thing. But it's sort of good. I enjoyed it. Considering this is obviously, the budgets are pretty low, it's kind of good. It's one of these things that certain things have dated and not dated well, in terms of movie making and some of the storytelling, which we'll get into. So this time, going in with the critical eye and like removing that sort of childhoodness, I was like, and weirdly, like it stands aside to me for the TV show. Like there are certain things I would let the TV show get away with, but watching this I wouldn't, and I don't. And we'll get into that. So I may be kind of critical at points.
It is weird seeing it in color, right? I mean,
yes.
And then seeing the color Daleks too, which are sort of like, so far ahead of the Revive show that does that. Of course, they're looking at the black and white and saying, well, what does this look like in color? Well, who the hell knows?
yeah. I like that you get like a clear hierarchy of colors as well within the Daleks, which is kind of cool. But no, let's quickly jump in with a bit of a summary, because there's a few things worth pointing out. So, Constable Tom Campbell, played by Bernard Cribbins. I was wrong, by that. I want to put a correction. In the last episode, I said it was Roy Castle. Roy Castle appears in the first film. This is obviously the second film. This is Bernard Cribbins, who does come back and spends time with the 10th Doctor. Complete side. Anyway, so Constable Tom Campbell, is embroiled in a jewellery heist, and whilst pursuing the criminals, is hit over the head and finds himself at the foot of a police phone box. He enters the phone box but finds it's actually not a phone box. It is, of course, the Doctor's TARDIS. He falls unconscious, and the Doctor, played by Peter Cushing, and accompanied by his granddaughter Susan and niece, whose name I can't find, basically kind of kidnap him.
Yes.
and take him on a trip to the year 2150. When they arrive there, they find that the London, at least, is in ruins, as there has been an invasion by Daleks. And through a series of adventures, they find the Daleks have robot men that police the area, but a rebellious force is building up, and they basically travel to the south of England to find a mine and something that the Daleks are looking to dig up. And when there, they encourage a rebellion. They fight back and use the Earth's magnetic force to destroy the Daleks and drive them from planet Earth. And eventually returning back to 1966, slightly earlier than they left, allowing Constable Tom to not even stop the jewelry heist, but basically catch the criminals and drive them off to prison to gain a promotion, and the Doctor to do whatever the hell he wants. It's a kind of sort of simple plot, and I'm going to have questions about quite a few things in this, but let's start with the simple one. We've obviously talked about the first Doctor. Peter Cushing being the Doctor. What are your thoughts on that, first and foremost?
He's not a very good Doctor. I think he's very unremarkable. He is the least. He's not important, really. And we talked in the previous episode about how the Doctor initially was sort of not the main character. That is even more true in these movies, where Cushing has more of the star name, but just really has very little interesting to do.
Yeah, I'm the same. It's nice to see him, because I always like seeing Peter Cushing in these, in these sort of like 60s and 50s films. But he's hidden under like a silly moustache and wig. He's sort of like taking on, he's hunched over and he's obviously doing his thing to look even older. Like he basically drives the TARDIS there and back, and that's about it for the point of the story. And at the end, he comes up with the magnetic thing, but he's not the
hikes through Britain for a while. I mean, that's about it.
Yeah. It's sort of he's like, it's not the dynamic Doctor that we would get to know within a couple of regenerations.
But he does seem more mobile than the Grandpa Doctor, that we've seen previously. He, of course, he's played by a much younger actor. So I'm just amazed at how, we've seen a lot of movies over the course of this podcast, and I'm just amazed at how prognostic this movie is. They go forward all the way to the 1980s, and it looks exactly like Thatcher's Britain.
There was two. I wanted to comment on this of like, because this is sort of like loaded with, and this seems to be as a thing with British TV, loaded with working class, British things. And there's two things. The two things I wanted to highlight is, we talked when we did the Quatermass episodes about how cool would it be to have a crossover between Doctor Who and Quatermass. Well, technically, in a weird way, we kind of get it in this film, because the lead guy, Wheeler, let me just double check his name. Wheeler, Wyler. He's one of the lead sort of the rebellions guys. Is played by Andrew Keir, who a year after this would play Quatermass in Quatermass in the Pit. So I didn't know that, and I saw him on screen. I was like, hang on, I know your face. And then I checked it, so that was quite exciting. The other thing, though, the Robot Men. Now, 10 years after this film comes out, a certain law enforcement comic character hits the screen with a red and black helmet with a reflective visor and a black shiny sort of suit. It has other accoutrement on it. But no one can tell me that sort of like Carlos Esquerra or John Wagner didn't watch this when they made Judge Dredd.
It is very, I hadn't thought of Judge Dredd, but it is very, it's the kind of thing that it was, I kept thinking, I've seen this many times since, and I don't know exactly in what. Yeah.
Yeah, the Robot Men really made me think of Judge Dredd. Like not in obviously that's more stylized, but like just that the red sort of flash over the top of the helmet, the reflective sort of, it was shaped to go around the eyes, and I was like, oh, this not enough to be plagiaristic, but like that's an influence, most definitely an influence. But no, I liked all that. That stuff I all really liked. I thought that was really cool. Like some of the design aspects, and like even like the Dalek ship that flies around and stuff. It all looks really cool.
Well, except for they call it a flying saucer, and they say, well, it certainly looks like a flying saucer. Well, it has a flying saucer as part of its design, but that's like saying the Enterprise is a flying saucer. Well, it has a saucer, but and there are a lot of things like that are very strange in this, including it's the stereotype of Doctor Who is that as soon as anybody enters the police box, they say, oh, it's big around the inside. And here, Tom Campbell is inside. He's kidnapped to 2050. And it's only as he comes out that it's like, it's as if he remembers to mention this.
Yeah. You're right. One of the things I like is like, it's all ruined. Like how quickly he adapts to this thing of like, oh, it's in ruins. And he's like, oh, we've gone forward in time. Why they chose 2150? Like he's never explained. It's just like, we just go to 2150. Why? I don't know. Sounds like a nice round number. And so like when he comes out, it's in ruins. Yeah, like there's no sort of like shock and awe that like, sorry, we've travelled through time, and and like you say, it's bigger on the inside and all this other stuff. Like. And also, like, you appear to have brought your very young granddaughter. Susan in this is much younger than in the TV show.
Yes.
And so there are elements of this which there's subplots which will work in the show that do not work in this film.
Yeah, and in fact, in the original version of this as a serial, she is old enough that she is paired off with a future guy from this ruined Earth, and she stays. This is the last Susan appearance. Yes, and it's quite remarkable. It's the first time that they write off a companion, and at the end, she basically just says like, "Grandfather," and he says, "Yes, I know." Like you're in love, and you want to. And it's like, why would you leave her in this ruined Earth that's clearly you're never going to visit again? Like, this is not a permanent fixture of Doctor Who continuity. Like, you left her in a future that's going to be erased. It's very bizarre.
Talking about being erased, because we're going to get into details of this. This is the other massive problem I have with the end of this show, at the end of this film.
Mm-hmm.
So they find out that what can defeat the Daleks, and the Doctor makes a point of it, was under your feet all along. The Earth's magnetic core, blah, 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 blah. Okay? And they call this out that they have a time machine because they take Tom back to a few moments to before the jewelry heist appears. Now, I've got enough problems with that because he goes back into his own continuity and he's not there.
Right.
So, and also the TARDIS appears in the same place. So, but I think you're supposed to forget that. However, it shows that they can adjust when they go back in time. And they now have information that would help defeat the Daleks.
Yes.
So at no point does the Doctor say, when did they invade? Right. Oh, they invaded in 2146. Right, well, we're going to pop back to 2146 with this information about how and we're actually going to save the Earth and its vast population.
I think this is something you're quite right, and I think this at the end of this is very strange, and I think it works so much better in the show because, in the show you just sort of accept, and it's stupid. I mean, one of the things that I hate about Doctor Who is the constant reasons not to use the TARDIS, right?
Yeah.
This is a fixed moment in time. You can't change. What are you talking about? You have a time machine. Go back 2 minutes and save somebody. But there's always an excuse. But you sort of accept it because that's the format, and you're going to have to live with that for like 8 episodes or whatever. But in an 80-minute movie, it's that then you don't see him, the other version of him. They make a point about coming back, or you don't, and it's very, very strange. And then on top of that, you've seen like the Earth ruined. And it's, look, Another weird thing about Doctor Who is how much Britain is the center of the focus. Certainly, it is strange that if you want to drool to the center of the Earth, you're gonna do it in the south of England, and that's just everybody knows.
Not even well known for mines. Like, you know, go to somewhere where they go to Wales or something where like they're well known for mines. Where they're like, well, they've already made it halfway down, might as well go the rest of the way. Like, it makes no sense.
Or fly to the Marianas Trench underwater. Yes. You know, like, I mean, it's so bizarre. But okay, I'm willing to bracket that and forget that. But it's very strange. Like, it does reference that the rest of the planet the Daleks have pelted the rest of the planet with meteorites, and it's clear that this ruined human civilization is not limited to Britain.
Mm-hmm.
Given that, I mean, you have seen a global apocalypse. To reduce that to a policeman gets a promotion for stopping bank robbers is so weird and insulting.
Well, it's the fact of like this is the thing, and one of the things I would say is Bernard Cribbins, wonderful actor, national treasure and sort of stuff, right? He was known for comedy. He's a sitcom actor. Like, he's done dramatic stuff later in life, but he was known for comedy predominantly. Like, he'd been in a couple of, like, I think the Carry On films. He'd done sort of sitcoms, and so, and you see it in this film. Yeah. Like, every chance they're like, oh, we're gonna do a bit of comedy, and it just sort of feels like if this policeman walked up to me in 1966, I think I would laugh in his face as well. Like, he has no authority, he has no sort of presence in this way. And one of the things I didn't have a chance to watch the original series. I have seen it in the past, but like the Tom that's in that, is he any better? Like, does he come across in a similar way, or is he? Is it still leaning towards that comedy? Because I was thinking back to us when we watched the Aztecs, and you had the character, the male, and he was a geography teacher or some stuff, and he was like, "Oh, I'm going to go out and battle like Aztec warriors," and I'm thinking like this copper wouldn't have survived long in Aztec culture.
Right. Yeah, I don't remember. I mean, at that time, I don't even remember if he's a part of the original serial, because at that time I was struggling with this, because at that time there was that guy from, is that Tom? Is he's named Tom?
I think so. I will check. Let me just go check. But yeah, it just felt like, sort of like a weird sort of tone thing. So Roy Castle plays Ian. It was Ian was the name of the character in the first one. Yeah. He was the teacher.
He was introduced in the first episode, and so he's just a part of the show. Here, I mean, I think Tom is original to this.
So Tom may be an original element from... Yeah.
Probably as a vehicle for...
Yeah, like what's the word I'm looking for? Like you say, sort of a viewer's sort of point of view sort of character.
Well, and to give Cribbins a sort of role that fit him, I guess.
Possibly, they say, but it's the fact that, like I say, it does keep leaning into the comedy, and it just doesn't work repeatedly. I'm trying to look if there's anything. Like, I can't see. Maybe I'm not going to Google it about sort of companions, but yeah, it's just bizarre. It's just a weird one where it's sort of like they keep trying for things. Like he's willing to chase people down and stuff, like, they hear some noise and he chases them down and stuff, and then he falls through a door, but it's almost like a whoops, sort of like, they play it for comedy repeatedly, and I'm just like, it jars with the tone. Like, it feels like he should be a bit more of a man of action kind of figure, to sort of integrate with the sort of the rebels from the future.
Right, and he's just played for comic relief, and those scenes don't really work. I mean, I understand that, like, comedy has changed and sort of physical comedy is not a surprise today, but watching him sort of like imitate one of the Robomen, and eating food and stuff, it's like, don't they notice he's not one of them? Both Ian and Barbara were essentially replaced by Tom Campbell and Louise, who are new to the Cushing movies. So
Right.
yeah,
Okay. So it was a new. Okay, it was a new setup because they wanted to have a new entry point characters. Fair enough. That makes sense. It just feels jarring in that sense because there's several. Because one of the things I like about some of these parts of this film is it does sometimes go for like dramatic impact.
Yeah.
You know, you do get that thing of when you meet the future rebels. I'm like, oh, they're the story I want to follow. Like all those characters are good. Like the Wyler, like I said, the sort of the Andrew Keir, the guy in the wheelchair, the younger guy with the knife, like all those characters. I'm like, oh, it's their story. Like that's the crew I want to see. That's who I'm interested in following.
Well, and there's a strange shift in tone in this, isn't there? Because the Tom stuff is comedy, and you'll have him stuck on the Dalek ship doing a comedy routine, and then you'll cut to like harsh realities of like not having enough food and the guy in the wheelchair, dying to try to take out a few Daleks, and it's like, oh, this is effing dark,
Yeah. Yeah,
and it's the dark stuff I like. I mean,
I agree. Like this is where I was watching it and going like, I was thinking the same thing. Like, oh, if this had like lent into that and taken it, and the thing was watching this, and this, just me, I couldn't help but think of like the Quatermass movies because it's a comparison piece, and how they had, because the TV show's not like, let's be clear, like the Doctor Who series isn't comedy like at this point. Like it was, it's not dark, but it has its moments. I'm even talking about the Aztec stuff last week. It talked about human sacrifice, it talked about changing people's religion, it had all these other stuff in. Like it was quite,
I don't think is there a comedic moment in there?
Not really.
4 episodes. I mean,
no,
yeah.
It's constantly trying to present a dramatic story,
right?
And so I can imagine that the serial of this is the same. And then so when I thought this was Hammer. I don't think it is Hammer that actually did this, but like when the Quatermass films of serials get translated into a film, that they maintain that tone. Yeah, granted, in the first 2 you get grumpy American Quatermass, but it's still very much that tone. It's a dramatic thriller. Like each one of them is a dramatic thriller. And I'm watching this and going like, yeah, this could have been and should have been way more of that tone. Like I'm not saying like horror or sort of like hard-hitting thriller, but like stick with what is working. This should have been way more affecting than it is.
No, I agree, and I think that. I mean, of course, I'm a fan of those first 2 Dalek serials. I mean, the third one is partially lost, so I've never seen it all the way through. But no, I'm totally with you, and it feels as if like they wanted to insert Cribbins as a character, and play up to his strengths. It's sort of like, Oh Heavenly Dog, like, well, Chevy Chase and Lassie are both popular. Let's put them together in a movie. We've got Daleks, we got Cribbins. What could go wrong? But I do feel like, I mean, I didn't share this earlier, but just about like sort of my general impression is that everything in there's no aspect of this plot that isn't terribly wrong in some way.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. It's just wrong-headed. And yet it is fun to watch, and it is very watchable. It mostly works. All that dark future stuff like is fantastic. Watching characters get mowed down by the Daleks, even if they're sort of like they playing up the Nazi stormtroopers and they're using gas and instead of the laser beams and stuff. I mean, it still works. I mean, it's watching humans get mowed down and watching a resistance. And I mean, that's one thing that I loved about, I mean, I think you feel this in those first 2 Dalek serials is you really feel that sense of a threat of the Daleks and that analogy to them being Nazis. And that this is really, which has been done with like the Borg, it's been done with the Cybermen, just this idea of the depersonalization of, the stormtroopers, of the fascist government. And you really feel a sense of threat, and you really feel like, no, this is war, and we're not going to defeat the Daleks without a bunch of people dying. And I love that.
Oh yeah, no, it's again, this is that sort of a bit of a double-edged sword in this film. I think I like the way the Daleks are presented. Like, I like the fact that they've got that sort of claw thing, so they're actually, you see them handling the ship. It's not just a plunger, which I've always felt is a bit silly, and then they have the gun. But like you say, the gas thing sort of works for me. Like as an agent of it's not a long distance weapon, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that they just basically plow up and they're just like and just like gas these people. I think it's really effective. However, and this comes down to choreography and planning of certain scenes. When they fight back, when the people fight back and they start sort of like rebelling against the Daleks, there are a number of times where the Daleks basically sort of hit a curb and fall over.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just like, no, they don't. That should not be the case. I shouldn't see that. And especially towards the end, there's a bit where there's a ramp on the ship.
Yeah.
And they jump on one, and you see it slide backwards, and it falls over, and you just see these like caster wheels on the bottom, and I'm just like, this should have been this could have been choreographed so much better, so that was, even in the 60s. Like, I've seen other things do it, even on TV, where they're like, look, we don't want to show this, so we're going to hide that. But this just had this sort of like wide shot of this chaos, and it's like, why have you never done this? Literally, kick them over. Like, that seems to be all you've got to do. Like, kick them over from behind, and you're fine.
Well, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, when they were shooting all these Dalek scenes, including all the Dalek stuff in this period on the BBC, the actors would be hot inside. They can't see, and you can see like that same ramp that you're talking about, which is like the access ramp into the UFO. You're talking about, during a fight scene as they roll one back down. But even when they go up it, you can see the Dalek is like about to fall off the ramp and sort of corrects himself and goes back left. And there's another scene where they've constructed sort of a ramp going down to the pit that they're going to drop the bomb into the center of the Earth. And that ramp has no guardrails. And you can see, like, the Dalek is hewing right to the inside wall. Like, there's an actor in there who is terrified that if he goes 3 inches to the right, he is falling down 20 feet.
Yes.
I mean, yeah. So but I mean, I do think, and it's true that in the original serial and in the original movie, the Daleks, and there's a reference to this, that the Daleks can only move on electrified plating, right? It's like they're bumper cars, and there's the web of electrified stuff overhead. And so now they're much more mobile. I mean, they do make an effort to make them more threatening in this. But you're quite right. I mean, especially in combat sequences, I think and this happens all over in Doctor Who. I mean, even today when they use the Daleks, the worst part for me is a sequence where they defeat a Dalek by throwing a coat over his head.
Yeah,
So he can't
I was going to say that. At the mine at the end, they throw like a coat over it. And I'm like, all you're doing is undermining the fact that these have taken over the world. Like, if all the military needed was like, some ninja and a bit of tarpaulin, like, this should have been over in minutes.
Yeah, carry parachutes. Just whip out that parachute and throw it over some Daleks. You're done.
The other sequence again is when Wyler has Susan in that van, and they're sort of veering down the road and stuff. And that, again, I get what they're going for, but it looks like him basically sort of colliding with a bunch of like balsa wood stand-ins.
Because that's what they are.
That's exactly what it is. And again, it's that thing of going like, I've seen this done in 60s films better. This isn't a lack of budget because you've done some pretty cool stuff. This is a lack of thought and inventiveness of what you're putting on screen. And
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I mean, they're keeping shots in, I mean, that, like with the Dalek sliding down. I mean, I found myself thinking that Dalek falls over and there's an explosion, and I thought, is that added after the fact, or do they have an explosive device in this Dalek that obviously doesn't have a person in it? And if you can afford that explosion, I mean, does that mean that you just did one take? And if the Dalek falls over and you see the wheels and then the explosion happens?
I'm convinced. That's exactly what I'm convinced of. That ambush scene is the first and only take they had. Because if you watch the background, there's a load of other stuff going on where you're like, if this had multiple takes, they'd be like, right, no, sorry, guys in the corner, can you not do what you're doing? Can you try this instead? I think there's also a scene similar to that. I think it's when they go towards the end. It's when they realize that the doctor gets hold of the microphone and sort of says, "Robot men attack the Daleks.
This order can't be countermanded."
Yes, yeah. Which again, if that's this is the other thing. Like, if that had been set up as the only control panel for the things, like, it's not, so it doesn't matter. But there's a moment in that when they start taking off their helmets, which again, I'm like, he's not told them to do that. They're just doing it. But one of them forgets to do it. Yeah. And so he runs at the Daleks, and then he sort of halfway goes, "Oh shit, I better take off." And again, it's one of those things where, like, any of the directors will be like, "Stop. Right, back to your positions. Remember what we want. We want you to, everyone's got to take their helmet off in unison, then go." And it's things like that when you go, like, you did go, this was the only take they took of this, because this is all they could do. This is what they had the time to do. This is what they had the money to do. Yeah. And so, I appreciate that's what they had to do. But
yeah, I mean, I kind of, you and I we kind of dig, B movies and low budget stuff, and that stuff doesn't bother me as much. I'm looking at, apparently the budget was just over a £250,000, right? In '66. But it's surprising because, I mean, on the one hand, the sort of fad for the Daleks meant that anything they did was going to do okay, right? So phone it in. On the other hand, the first film did well. It did well enough to make a sequel. Why did you not, budget an additional take or something?
Yeah, well, that was the mentality, wasn't it? You've just said it. Like, they're like, oh, well, we know Daleks are a big thing. We don't need to put as much effort in. We know this is going to make money, so let's try and maximize those profits by reducing the budget, which is obviously the mentality for a lot of these things. But like you say, us coming at it 60 years later, sort of like 50 years plus later, we look at it and go, yeah, this sucks and that sucks. But like you said, the one thing I would say is, again, just to reiterate, it does have a charm.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, and again, everything is wrong. Everything is daft.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I was just thinking of, like, one of the most preposterous things is you have a mine of human slaves. I mean, like, okay, I'm willing to accept the sort of like Robo-Men, okay, whatever. They're reprogramming humans and making them slaves. At least they look kind of cool. I'm looking at the poster. It looks, it features the Robo-Man. It's nice. But, they have a tool shed that, I mean, every time that people are sneaking around, you sort of like have a guy in a Dalek suit going by, coincidentally not looking in his direction. And it is just like, there's a tool. I mean, you can murder a Dalek, you can murder a Robo-Man, and just slide him under a tarp, and nobody will ever notice. And, and then there's a tool shed that you could just hide in. And I'm thinking, like, this is not exactly a Nazi concentration camp. These Daleks are not known for their organization.
Well, this is where, cause I can't, I don't really know the serial. I'm assuming there's that bit in it. But you can sort of, one of the things that I found curious is about, because again, like, my thinking would be, we're going to adapt this into a movie. We need to restrict the locales. All right, so we need a mine, or we need something. Okay, well, like you said, let's not have it in a mine. Why does the mine have to be in the South Coast? Or we could just actually say, well, the mine is in, this part of London. Like, it doesn't need to be it doesn't need to be this great travel. But what I can see is that at the moment when Susan and Wyler are traveling, they take up that they spend a night in with that those two women when they get captured.
Mhm.
Like I'm watching and going, oh, this is clearly a cliffhanger. Like that's where an episode ended. Was they pull back the curtain and there's a Dalek there, and I'm like, oh, that's end of episode 3 in this 4-part serial. Like that's, and there was a few moments I'm like, oh, they've kept that, and that's why they've kept that, because but like, it doesn't need to be. London's big enough that if you're on foot, like you don't have to be trekking halfway across the country to have this sort of thing. Because the other thing as well I would highlight, don't forget, like I love it whenever they do this. We've got to get to Southampton. Where is it they go to? Like they say Southampton or somewhere, but they say like from London.
Bedfordshire.
Okay, they've got to get to Bedfordshire.
Bedfordshire.
Yeah, so they've got to get to Bedfordshire. So I'm going like, how long do they spend in 2150?
Yeah.
Like, how? Yeah, because it's that thing again when you watch these programs and from somewhere like well, we're here in Stratford-upon-Avon and we're now going to travel to London on horseback. Scene 2.
Right.
Here we are in London. You're like, how quick did you gallop all the way? Even if you did, that's like how many days ride?
Well, this is one thing that I really dig about these two serials is that they both this one is 6 episodes. I think the original Dalek one is like 8, and they really go to other locations. There's like a swamp in the first Dalek one. There's a whole episode that takes place in the swamp, and it's a little slow. It's BBC of the time.
Yeah.
But they're kind of like thinking of ways. They're padding out these episodes, but they're thinking of ways to keep the story going and involve complications. And clearly, that house is sort of a complication along the way, right? But you're right. I mean, it is a sort of radically slimmed down adaptation of the serial. But I do like that house. I do like this, this little digression. And usually we see that in movies, and it's, in war movies, that's the people who take in the partisans and, hide them in their attic and whatever. Here, they're traitors, and they're willing to sell out other humans for a little more food.
But you could still have that, but have it in London. And I recently read, I'm a big James Herbert fan. I recently read 48, which has this idea that in 1945, instead of losing the war, Hitler unleashes this final chemical weapon on the world, and the only people that survive are people with a certain blood type. And then there's these others that are sort of like slight survivors that are hunting down the survivors because they want to do this blood transfusion. Like they know it won't work, but it becomes this pursuit thing. But it sort of sets up all over like blitzed London. And there's a couple of things like this. And you sort of think like, London's big enough that house could have just been like a bombed out house or a semi-destroyed house in London. And it would have, I'm sort of we can still use the set we had for something else, and we could do this. Like, it doesn't have to be this trek across the country, because it does. It sort of elongates pieces when you're like, I'd rather them spend more time doing something else. Like,
yeah, and the London sets are quite good. I mean, I love the bombed out rubble stuff. I mean, it does recall sort of the Blitz. It does recall sort of like Germany Year Zero kind of rubble, post-war rubble, and it feels very much like dystopia. This is like some serious stuff going on. And then you're sort of in the countryside, and it's okay. I mean, they kill 2 guys, and it's like, that was like another cliffhanger that you just did away, presented the threat and eliminated it in a minute. But I mean, I'm with you. You're right. It makes sense. This mine doesn't need to be there. I mean, I think it's weird what's kept and what's not in these adaptations.
It is, and again, it's one of the things that's most interesting as well is you said before about the reasons they can't use the TARDIS. And again, they present a reason as to why they can't use the TARDIS in this, which becomes a complete moot point within about 10 minutes. Because what happens is they're sort of like, you can't move around at daytime. And you go, okay, so the rebels come and get them. And they can't shift this girder and this rubble that sits in front of it. But then they go into the rebel base and they're like, I've got 30 guys here. Could we go back later? I think if you give us a hand, we could be out of it, and we can, you know, then you can just jump in the TARDIS. It's you know, time and relative distance to space. We'll just shift. You know, we'll get away and then come back. Like I'm confused. Like the Doctor is useless in this. Like at no point does he go like, oh well, I've actually got a time machine upstairs. It's got a bit of brick around it. Can you help us move it? And we'll be done.
Hey guys, I've got a great weapon. You know I'm asking you to help me.
Yeah.
And you think that, you know, it's not worth risking your lives for or manpower for. But dude, I have a time machine. You know, you're thinking about the desperate last ditch resistance against the Daleks. Kind of have a trump card here.
Yeah, you need
nothing
something.
Really makes sense. I mean,
no, you need something. This is the thing with it, you know, you need something to take the TARDIS completely off the board. And because it just seems because again at the end of the story, like they're just back in the TARDIS, and I'm like, oh, so you
hiked back to life
and you cleared the rubble. All's good. All right, fine. Tom's had his uniform. Tom's had his uniform ironed.
I always wonder. I mean, you brought up time. I always wonder in these movies about clothing, and I wonder about going to the bathroom. I know this is weird, but you know, you're talking about like the passing of time. And I always think like, you know, in movies where two people get stranded together and they've, you know, it's like, yeah, they're wandering off to shit just off camera, you know. How does that go down? Certainly that's a bonding experience. When you're hiding from the government, you know, figuring out how to do this. What do you use for toilet paper? You know, you're figuring this stuff out. When they're put into the prison on the Dalek ship, that, you know, when the Doctor escapes with a comb, you know, which kind of works. That's the test to become a robot man.
Yeah, you pass the intelligence test. I've got problems with that as well but we'll get to that in a second. Yeah,
no, go for it.
The Doctor's the one that's like, I'll pop the comb under. It breaks the connectivity points and all that other stuff. I'm like, okay, you know, that's an interesting point. You know, using a non-magnetic point, fine. They then break out, and the Daleks go, well, all three of you have passed the intelligence test.
Right?
No, they didn't. The Doctor did. But
yeah. Also, like if a few millimeters break is enough to do it, you could force that door up. You don't really need the comb. Yeah. But they're thrown in there, and I'm thinking, like, okay, you're still wearing the same clothes you arrived in. What's going to happen in this little prison the size of a closet when one of you has to go to the bathroom? You know? I don't know.
Well, no, you're right, though, because it is this thing of, like, they trek across the country. They all end up at the mine, and they've all got this stuff. And again, like, and more important, like, because you've got Tom and not Susan, the other one, the niece, Louise, yeah. Like they've just met, and he'll be like, "Well, I can pee in a bush," and she's like, "Well, I've got more problems." I'm like, "All right, I'm not sure how this works." Like, you know, this is, yeah, and it is. I agree with what you're saying. It's that sort of, whenever you spend time with, characters like this, it becomes more obvious. And the more modern the show is, the more problematic it becomes. Because, like, say Game of Thrones, you sort of go, yeah, you live in a sort of a crap hole anyway. Like, you live in this sort of, like, you know, faux medieval world. Like, I'm pretty sure you're used to this sort of idea. You know, yeah, you're going to, like, say, have a crap in a bush and you're fine. Like, no one cares. You stink anyway. Move on. But, like, yeah, with this, like, you know, there's people that be like, yeah, no, we're used to sort of just, like, using facilities. Like, how do I manage that? It's the whole thing with, like, 24. Like, when you are following someone, like, you know, for 24 hours, at no point does Jack Bauer go, look, I know this briefing is really important, but I'm busting for a piss. Like, I've really got to go. Like, so, yeah, it does. These things do sort of become obvious when you sort of go, how long have you been here? Like, how does this work?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's you who pointed out that time and sort of how much time has elapsed. And yeah, I mean, it's one of the many artificialities of this. And it's strange because all the stuff that I like is the sort of hard-bitten, I mean, basically, Earth has been conquered.
Yeah.
right? I mean, the Daleks have already conquered the Earth. I mean, this could be called Invasion Earth, but the invasion's already happened, and the Daleks have already won by the time you arrive. I mean, I think that's such a fantastic idea for a Doctor Who story. And when you've got, I mean, adding a little bit of sort of, like even the Resistance base in London, they were a little too cavalier about like triggering the light and walking. They're just like a little too relaxed. There's, it's a very prim and proper base. It's clean. Everything's in its place. It's like, file those things over here. It's a very civilized form of resistance that they're fighting.
Yes.
And I think if they had gone more hardcore, I mean, we don't need to see, Peter Cushing taking a shit. But, if it had gone a little more dirty, a little more grim, it could have really accentuated that idea of not only a bombed out London, but the Daleks having invaded and won.
Yeah.
It's over.
That's what I mean. Like, you have this resistance force, and they all seem rather chipper about it.
Well, they're British, right?
Yeah, I understand that. Yes, that's very true. Stiff upper lip. But one of the things I find interesting is you get the guy in the wheelchair who's clearly like this. He's the determined one. Like, he's like, no, we are not going to get me. I'm going to do this. Like, I've got the bombs and I've got this, I've got that. Like, straight away, I sort of know he's going to be the one that sort of sacrifices himself for the cause or whatever, which is fine. I like that because you get that character. But in that case, then I was hoping there would be that counter, the sort of, the Bill Paxton of Aliens, like, it's all over, man, it's all over. Like, I wanted that counter, like someone. How is this not broken more people when they're like, no, like, I'm going to give myself up to become a robot man. They get food, shelter, and they're
eating pellets. They're eating like M&Ms that are nutritional pellets. But yeah, I mean, we don't know what it's like to be a Robo Man, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. So, like, why is there no one that sort of like, I think of things like the Matrix, where Cypher gives himself back. He's like, I know this stake isn't real, but I want to. Ignorance is bliss, and I was hoping there would be that character. And I don't know if there's one in the serial that's like, I'm done. Like, yeah, they've won. Like, there is no fight anymore. I'm giving myself up.
Yeah, I don't remember if there is one in the serial, but I mean, you're right. That would help illustrate it. I think that the serials do have both of these serials have more of a sense of the dirtiness of this job. At the same time, if you remember the Aztecs, like, there is a sort of kind of perfunctory, now we're going into this room and having a conversation, and that sort of artificiality is still there, right? But as an American, I joke, but I do kind of watch this and think, right, that's that sort of like nationalistic representation of like, right, stiff upper lip, keep calm, can carry on. The Daleks have already won. Now we're a resistance fighter. Like the French would be like smoking, say, put on the border the mad, those fucking Daleks, we will all die, But the Brits, well, yeah, right, this is what we're doing.
Here's the plan. We're going to be going at 4:30 because at 4 we have tea, and Tom will be leading us. And yeah, I can imagine, because that's the thing. Like, Tom falls into line with all this so fast. Which
also, like the British version would be, half of you will die, the other half will probably lose your legs, and we go tomorrow. yeah.
And that, that's the thing. Like, there is this British but one of the things I wanted to touch on about that, okay, we go back to the end of this, and it's one of the things that, look, when I went back to thinking about why don't they go back to the start of this and help prevent this invasion, it's not. And I think they've done it because it's not in their lifetime. But there's Tom goes off to protect or to apprehend these criminals. And at no point, if this was a more, let's say, not to say modern, but more modern, would end with that sort of like existential, dread of what's the point of saving, me stopping these criminals in 150 years, like the population of this planet is going to be wiped out by an alien invasion. Like,
Right.
what? Like at no point he just goes, "I'm getting a promotion."
Well, I mean, and the other thing is the way he drives away with that smile on his face. I was very confused that, I mean, I was very confused by that. He punches the bank robber. I mean, well, it's not even a bank, right?
Is it
It's a
jewelry
burglary.
shop or yeah.
So, I mean, he lets the burglary occur. Then he punches a guy through a window. And I'm thinking, like, okay, so I guess they have the jewels on them. So, and at this point in time, they're going to believe the cop, right? There's no questions asked. And then he drives away. And it's like, I guess he doesn't say, I'm driving to the police station.
Yeah.
There's this weird moment where I think, has he decided to like join them and be the getaway driver?
Basically, this experience has driven him like manic, and he's like, "I've just clubbed these 3 men to death, and I'm going to go live off the spoils on these jewels. Screw it!"
It's like, fuck it, the world's coming to an end anyway.
It's one of those weird things because he actually talks about being a promotion. I think he's supposed to insinuate he's taken him to the police station. However, I can't get past the fact I'm like, but you've just left a shop burning.
Yeah.
Like
that's true.
You've literally just left the scene of the crime. Like
And
you're
I guess
not getting a
nobody's
promotion.
inside, but I mean,
You're not checking for anybody in the building for damage. Like there could be more jewels. Like there's a person that turns up when it goes wrong the first time and he gets hit. There's a citizen that has more concern who says, "Let's put out the fire and things." I'm like, he's a better constable than Tom Ever is.
Well, I mean, I think you make an excellent point. I mean, I love that he doesn't. He's not anguishing of like, I've learned something. He's so focused on his promotion and so giddy with joy about it. I think what we've established is policeman Tom Campbell is just a raving psychotic. That's the key to this.
Yeah, no emotion about anything in this film. He just rolls through all of this, and then he's like, "Yeah, I got a promotion, which means more money." Like, yeah, and then
in a weird way,
yeah.
But isn't that just as myopic as the 2 women living alone, right? Like, I mean, one of the things that I like most about this is in that darkness. I mean, you're right that there's no resistant fighter who says, "What's the point of this? We've already lost." But you do have the 2 women, and then you also have this guy who's, essentially a profiteer who's selling extra food, and he gets his comeuppance. He's killed by the Daleks, but he betrays humanity, and so you have at least 3 characters. You don't have kindly strangers who don't betray them along the way. Everybody betrays them. So there's this very cynical depiction of humanity at the same time that there's this very prim and proper resistance movement. I mean, it's very confused with what it has to say about the human race. But then to end with like this myopic, who cares about all of that? I got a promotion. All's well that ends well.
Yeah,
and he waves to the doctor, like, and the doctor, and thumbs up. Good on you.
That I was stunned at all of that. But you make a good point about the 2 women in the house, and then the profiteer. I forgot about the profiteer. One of the things I take, because again, there's a great moment when it's the doctor and one of the rebel guys, and he's making he's cooking a drink of tea or coffee or whatever. And he saw that smells good. He said, "Help yourself." And as he leans in, he kicks it off the fire, which I'm like, "Well, you're just a prick. Like you're just mean." But I was hoping, like, again, like, this is the thing of like, I find that all the rebels, like the resistance, if you will, seem to be representative of like London working class. They're all supposed to be in this thing of like, they are your regular Joes that make up the resistance. And I was so hoping that like when I meet this guy, because you say the guy, he's almost like the Spiv. So within World War II, there were these guys called Spivs that they were sort of the black marketeers, So if you ever get a chance to watch a sitcom from the 70s and I suppose the 60s and 70s called Dad's Army, which is about the home front. So, these were people that were too old or too young or whatever to join the actual army. They became the home front. And there's a character in that called Walker, who's a spiv, and it's basically sort of like he makes up an excuse as to why he can't join the army, but he's always got like, I've got extra rations. What are you looking for? Silk stockings? Oh, I can get you silk stockings.
Mm-hmm.
And there's supposed to be that character. So this guy feels like he would have. That's what this character is tapping into. This black marketeer, this profiteer, as you say. But I was so hoping that they'd be making some class statement by having him be upper middle class or upper class. Like, this is the guy that sort of like still goes around in a suit or something like, but I was hoping for something like that. Nope, it doesn't seem to go. And I'm like, oh, this is a really good opportunity. What's it going to be? Oh, he's just a dick. And so there are these like these mirrors to World War II culture and society. And again, you think about university, you talk about sort of those two women, and I'm sure there were those ones that gave people up, across Europe to the Nazis in occupied France and stuff like, yes, we've got Jews hiding in our attic, or yes, we've got parachuted in troopers hiding in our basement or whatever. There were these things I was thinking of, but I don't think that's what was being thought of by the writer or director.
Yeah, I mean, I wanna keep interrogating this. I mean, especially this class issue and the World War II parallel, because you're right that it's there, right? I mean, the echo of the Blitz, this character of the Spiv, the profiteer, which I'm not familiar with that term. We have a version over here, but it's different because we weren't the home front, but you see it in like Clue, right?
Yes.
But one of my favorite movies. But so there is this sort of like parallel to World War II, but it's not really pushed, right? It's not direct. And in Europe, I mean, certainly in France, if anything, like in occupied Europe, if anything, you would expect the Londoners, the city folk who are living with the Nazis, to be the ones to give people up. In the countryside, yeah, there are Nazi officers there, but there's like 10 to a town or something. There's lots of stuff going on that they're constantly struggling to control. It's a much more tenuous administration.
Yeah.
I find that it's very strange to me that these two women, I mean, first of all, women, matronly, you don't expect them to be traitors. But also, why are they not Robomen? You have Robomen miners. You can't have Robomen seamstresses?
Yeah.
Why do you need like this country shack to like men clothes?
Yeah, who's making the PVC outfits that the Robomen are wearing?
It's a system of shacks in the countryside that the Daleks control.
Yeah, because this is the thing as well is, well, I want to, we'll get to them in a minute, the motivations of things, but you're right, like the two women in particular, they feel like, to me, like you say, that they're surviving by the skin of their teeth, because one of the points that they make is it's overheard, isn't it? And they say, well, I told you if we told them where they were, they'd give us more food. And they have this like basket of like fresh food, like she's eating a carrot and some other stuff. And so I'm like, okay, so who's growing that food? Because we've seen they only eat pellets. So it still sort of is unclear, like this whole sort of like how this relationship works and why they're keeping them alive. Because what other purpose do they serve?
No, I mean it doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it's pretty clear that food was grown at the farmer's shack down the road, and their clothes are supplied by the seamstress shack. I mean, it's just the shacks all the way down. The Dalek economy is based on the shack system.
But this is where, like, going back to this idea of the motivation of the Daleks. So if we were going to have a World War, and this is why I think sometimes the Cybermen work better as a sort of a Nazi stand-in, because the Daleks were like extermination. They're just like, everyone that's not a Dalek is going to exterminate. But the Cybermen is about assimilation. like the Borg, like you said. It's about the fact that we will absorb you and your culture and everything. But there's no sort of clear motivation for what the Daleks actually want in this film. They've like invaded Earth, and then I'm like, they seem to be doing something with the Earth's core, but I'm like, I don't know what the end goal is.
I'll tell you what the end goal is.
Okay,
They say it.
yeah.
But it won't help you to understand anything.
Is it mentioned in the film? Did I
Yes, it
completely miss
is.
Okay.
So what they want to do, I mean, I cannot believe the words coming out of my mouth. Their plan is to drop that bomb to hollow out the metal at the Earth's core,
Yes, I
so
got
that they can go down there and start flying the Earth
That's
like a
right.
giant ship, and they're going to fly it back to Skaro because I guess they want a non-ruined planet near the ruin. I mean, because the gravitational mass of the Earth is best piloted from its center.
Yeah.
It is so insane.
I remember this now because I'm now picturing the bomb that is hanging there, and again, this is where I'm sort of looking at that big bomb, and I'm like, all right, I've seen pictures of Big Boy and
Batman and Little Boy,
yeah, and I'm like, I've seen pictures of these nuclear bombs that were dropped in Japan, and I'm seeing parallels here, and I'm going like, am I the only one that's seeing this? I want to be looking around the room going like, everyone else is seeing these World War II parallels, but no one on the set seems to have registered them. And so it just feels like this missed opportunity. And again, like I don't think that's what they were going for. This is an entertainment film. This is an adaptation of a TV serial. But from what you're saying, it sounds like the TV serial took it more seriously and gave it more depth than the film ever intended.
It's got more time. I do think it works better. But I mean, you're right. I mean, that the Fat Man bomb sort of parody is there, or not parody, but parallel is there. But it seems as if there are these World War II parallels. I mean, you mentioned about the Nazis. I mean, I sort of feel like the Cybermen are, the fascists from the inside point of view, right? They can brainwash you. They will turn a good citizen into a card-carrying Nazi. The Daleks are the Nazis seen from without. What they want to do is exterminate what is racially inferior. So I mean, there are these parallels, but it doesn't seem in control of those parallels, or that there's a coherent scheme to what it's presenting. And for example, that bomb, it's deflected by a bunch of boards that you could just tear off the wall. And I find myself thinking, like, the Daleks who have flown across. I mean, it's one of these moments where you say, like, right, they've flown across interstellar space, but they need seamstresses in the countryside, and their tunnel to the center of the Earth is made out of wood.
Yeah.
Who has built this? I mean,
this is where, and I often think this, and I think when we did our 50s movies as well, I thought this as was, I think we may have mentioned it, and I find it charming in a lot of respects, is when you have a future or an alien representation that is limited by the technology and scientific understanding of the time in which it was made. So we watch this now and go, like, who built this? Like, how does this work? Was it a drill? Was it this? Like, and if you watch a film now, they'll be like, oh, they've explained that. They have like a laser or they have a big drill or they've got something. They've got, we've addressed that, move on. But I guarantee there'll be films in like 50, 60 years. The people in 50, 60 years that'll be watching films from the 70s and also the 90s and the early 2000s and going like, they really didn't have a clue, did they, about how this works? But like it's the wooden boards that did make me laugh, because I'm like, that thing must weigh a ton, like, and some like fence panels seem to stop it.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, it's used like it's a pinball. Clearly, the pinball is what they're thinking there. it's so bizarre. And then it bounces off that 45-degree angle sort of boards down this other shaft. Why is the other shaft there? Is that access for the workers that built this? I mean, the other thing that you say this about technology, and of course you're right, and what strikes us as a problem is defined by what we know about science and, what's considered common knowledge. But in the 60s, they knew that, gravity increased as you near the center of the Earth, such that a drill or anything, I mean, it seems as if it's kind of being done by hand, by workers, right? Would kill a human being, certainly, and collapse a drill. Also, that probably the center of the Earth was molten, was not solid, hardened metal. And that the magnetic fields of the Earth, I mean, it seems as if you deflect the pinball down the shaft, you hit the magnetic bumper in the pinball game, and the Earth's magnetic fields go crazy. The Earth's magnetic fields are tied to that giant molten mass of magnified metal, right? I mean, that's the theory. That's not a problem here.
Nope.
It's
or the fact that in many respects, like I say, the rotation of the Earth and the fact that the atmosphere that is then pulled to the Earth that allows us to believe is also held in place a lot of the times by that rotation and the magnetic fields. Yeah, you want to mess with them? Like, none of that exists. We no longer become a sustainable planet. We become a rock that the Daleks are driving through space, cackling away. Like, it makes no sense.
And don't forget, the magnetic field has a localized effect. Like, it causes Daleks. I mean, it is cool, like seeing Daleks, some of them kind of crumple against the wall and,
that's quite cool.
Yeah, and some of them are pulled through a wall, and then another falls down the shaft. But then you think, well, why is it crumpling one, and somebody else who's closer to the bomb is just pulled down the shaft? And why is it only affecting this area? Like you said, you fucked with the magnetic field. Probably not a good idea.
No. Well, the thing is, you've said, like, it's affecting Daleks. Like, why are they made of? They are from Skaro. So, are they made from a mineral that's magnetic? Apparently so. What about all the men that are wearing sort of steel belt buckles, and they've got
the flying saucer?
Yeah. Why not any of that? Yeah.
No. Yeah. I mean, not to mention, I mean, humans and, this is affecting the brain at all.
Yeah.
No, that's not important. You hit the magnetic bumper and that gives you a win.
Yeah.
It is but having said this, I mean, all of this is a problem. But, it's like you cannot think about a scene and not point out some terrible, terrible, terrible problem with it.
Yeah.
And yet it's fun to watch, right?
It is. Like, it's fun. I'm trying to find an example. Like, I was actually thinking about this the other day. There are films that, like, I was thinking about, like, if I was to do like a top 100, and I was like, there's a difference between my top 100 favorite films and then, like, the top 100 films of all time. I recognize there's a difference.
Favorite versus best, right?
Yeah, like my favorite movies are just like the best films of all time, and it sort of applies to this. Where you're like, oh yeah, this is not a good film.
Right.
Like you say, the plot barely makes sense. The acting is uneven at times. The special effects aren't great. The ending makes no sense. It brings up all kinds of issues. However, it has a charm throughout, and an energy that just seems to carry it to make it work enough that I'm like, yeah, no, I enjoyed that.
Yeah. No, I feel the same way. And how many times have we, discussed movies in which there's something like the Daleks, or there's something like Cybermen, or some alien threat, and we wind up saying this should be funner than it is, right? Like, you've got aliens that look like insects that should be fun, yet it just falls flat. Here, you've got Daleks and you've got a devastated Earth. This is great pulpy stuff,
yeah.
And it works, and it's fun. That fun comes through, And you're right about charm, but I think even more than just a sort of whimsical charm. I mean, even just as a side, even the soundtrack doesn't work. You get battles, and I'm thinking this sounds like the music from at the same time the Batman TV series. Like it's a little goofy, and maybe that's due to Cribbins and the play. But I mean, like even that is off. But somehow I still love seeing those Daleks mowing down people, and there's so much that like. You know what I'm saying? That if you have this alien, you have this threat, you have a devastated Earth, that should be fun and work, and somehow it just does here.
Yeah, it does. I mean, pulpy is when you say pulpy is exactly right. Like this is pulp entertainment. Like they're plugging into some of the most basic ideas. That idea of the resistance and sort of like taking on the oppressor. Like it's all fine. It's all sort of like it all sort of works in that respect. And I think that's part of it, that it just on a basic entertainment note, it works. It's fine. It's when you start to dig at it a little bit, it starts to fall apart. And again, I think you
really have to dig. I mean, we're not going to the center,
No, but I think that's sort of the problem I have with it. That the moment it finishes is not even when it finishes, like the moment as you said, like the moment a scene ends, I'm like, hang on, like that.
Yeah.
Like a great example is the one where Wyler and Susan are escaping in that van. Mm-hmm. Like there's moments in that are cool. Like there's a bit where the front window shatters, so he gets a brick and smashes it out, and I'm like, okay. And then it's sort of you have him sort of swerving as it's getting through the Daleks and stuff, and because they're now shooting gas, I'm like, great, they haven't got lasers, so he's just got to avoid them. And overall, like watching it, and he hits them, a few of them, I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. That's a good idea. And then you sort of think back and you go, yeah, but I clearly saw like shards of balsa wood, and I saw this, and I saw caster wheels, and I'm like, huh. And all of a sudden you're like, it doesn't quite work on sort of the moment you think about it. And so it's a bit, I'm trying to think of an analogy. It's like eating something that you know is going to taste good, because you're like, or you don't know, and you go, well, this bit of pie looks good. I bet, oh, that's sweet. And then going, but there's something else in there that I'm not sure I like. And you sort of, I get this sort of aftertaste where I'm like, this thing, like sort of, I watch it and go, well, that's quite good fun. And then you watch, and then I think about it for 2 seconds and go, but the production crew clearly didn't give a shit about anything that's going on.
Yeah.
And it sort of sours it a little bit for me.
Well, that scene of the sort of fight on the street and the escape in that sort of like little red van thing, which is quite charming to me. I have sort of conflicted feelings about that scene from start to finish. Including the guy in the wheelchair, coming out. They're in a garage, and he just rolls out into the street for no reason whatsoever, and sees Daleks coming and decides, I feel like dying today. Yeah. And rolls at them and throws grenades. and I watch that and I think, right away, why are you going into the street? Oh, look, there are Daleks coming. You made a terrible decision. I can't care about this because you did this for no reason. And then I think, oh, it was nice seeing those grenades go off, and you sort of see the wheel spinning, and I think, well, that's not very well done. I don't really see the trajectory of the building that's going to cause that collapse. But, in the sort of like Ed Wood, don't mind the details. I quite like that they did this. It's dark and interesting. And then they take off in the red car, and I think, this is crazy. You're using like the least macho vehicle possible, like you're, to do this. But it's cute in a sort of like, I'm an American watching a British movie kind of way. Like, we would never have done that at any point in our history. But it's so charming. I know the Daleks are on the street, and then it kind of gets good, and then it gets bad. I sort of feel like, so I don't have as much like just the aftertaste thing. I sort of feel like, yeah, all of this is this mixture of, oh, that's fun, that's embarrassing, that's fun, that's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's that sort of swing, and I think the thing. I think generally, having not seen this in so long and having this sort of like, again, not like a huge nostalgic connection to it. Like I'm not going back and going like, oh, this is my childhood, like sort of thing. Nothing like that. But there was a thing of my expectation was like, oh, the Doctor, in the first one, like, at least the Doctor, he's not a dynamic character in the sense of he's running around. He's clearly he's an older guy. But at least he's doing things. Like he's sat there going like, well, I've invented the wheel and I've done this and I've done, he was an intricate part of or at least one of the threads of that Aztec story. In this, I was like, oh, I'm looking forward to seeing what this Doctor's like. Completely ineffectual. And I think that disappointment sort of hit me as well, where I was like, oh, the Cushing Doctor could be cool. And I'm back thinking like, this is the guy that played like Van Helsing as well as like Victor Frankenstein. And, I've known him being like doing all this stuff. Like, how cool would it be if like, the voice of the Daleks was Christopher Lee? That'd be really cool. Like, yeah. And then you get there and you're like, oh, he is literally just playing an old man. Like he's playing it like, the Nutty Professor kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, although even flatter than that.
Yeah.
I mean, what strikes me is this is Peter Cushing. He should jump. He should pop, right? Somehow Hartnell has more of a force of personality. Like even in those like the garden scenes in the Aztecs, I have a sense of his character. I sort of want to watch that character. Cushing just disappears into every scene he's in.
And that's the real problem. Is like that feels like why they bring in Tom. Mm-hmm. They've brought in this character to be this thing of going like, right, well, we've got a new character and he's going to be the sort of like the action Jackson kind of character. He's going to do all the stuff. And then you bring in a comedy actor and you're just like, well, no, where's the you needed that role. And like you said, to pop and have that personality. And, even his costuming and, again, you look at the Hartnell, the Doctor. Yes, he's not wearing a long scarf or a silly hat or anything like that, but like he has a very definitive outfit. And even like the Peter Cushing one is literally just wearing a brown suit. Mm-hmm. Like it's very dowdy, and they've really lent into like this sort of like grandfatherly figure. And you sort of there's part of me going like, this is the person that's invented this time machine that involves not just the traveling through time, but is able to sort of to warp the dimensions of an object to have something that's larger on the inside than it is on the outside. Like what? Like where's the zaniness? Where's the sort of like because this is obviously before the Gallifreyan stuff had come in at this point. Like they didn't have that yet.
And before the zany kind of comedy stuff.
Yeah, but like you'd have at least have something, like you say, some force of personality. And he's just almost absent throughout every scene. He's just there.
Yeah, it's like they've tried to make him as mundane and not unique as possible.
Yeah.
In a weird way.
Which is a really bizarre choice. And that when you get to like bizarre choices seems to be the sort of the pull of the day for this. Whether like like you said, like every choice they make is just bizarre. You
mentioned that he has created the TARDIS, and so we should say that in this version the Doctor is just a guy, right? Mm-hmm. Who's created the TARDIS, and that's not incommensurate with what we get on the show at this point, but clearly on the show he's an alien. We just don't know anything about him yet. But here he's just a scientist who's introduced in the first movie as having created this.
And that comes down to other bits and pieces, like where we're going, oh, that's great. In the show there's new bits of information. I think because it's a serial, you pick up things as you go. With this, I'm never, because it's a single film, there's no continuation. So I'm like, that character's never going to be anything other than than what he is. And so I'm often like, throughout the film, I'm just like, oh, this is what they're presenting. Like, this is your only opportunity to do this. This is what you're giving me. So I feel that flatness more than like, if you had a TV series and you're like, okay, in this series, or for these 4 episodes, the Doctor will take a step back and the companion will be a bit more of a protagonist. Fine, because that works in a TV show. In a film, it's called Doctor Who. You want him to be at the forefront, like and that's sort of the concern or the issue I had.
Now, in fairness, this isn't called Doctor Who.
No.
The first film is Doctor Who and the Daleks. This one is just Daleks Invasion Earth 2150. Doctor Who ain't important anymore. This is Daleks. This is the Dalek movie. Yes,
I agree, and that becomes quite evident. That, like, I need to go back and watch that first one because I didn't get a chance to watch the first one. And I think I do. I want to go back and watch that first one to make that comparison to go, oh, they made an active decision to shift the attention around on the Doctor. But yeah, I don't know. It just comes to that point where I'm like, it happens. This film sort of happens, and at the end of it, I go, it's all right. But there's so little for me to grasp onto, which I was disappointed at. Where I was like, oh, I'm looking forward to sort of getting into this thing of this movie version. It leads me to a final question, but I don't know. What were your sort of thoughts? Any sort of final thoughts in that respect, really?
Well, I don't know what to say about that, except to say that, and this is true of the serials too, that I remember the plot. Like I mentioned, like the swamp, I sort of remember Skaro. I dig Skaro, I dig, that plot better. I think for this, in both the serial, I remember a little more of the serial, but both the serial and this movie version, I remember the sort of bombed out London, and I remember like the Daleks having won. I don't remember anything about the mine. I don't remember anything about, that resistance room. I just remember, the Daleks having taken over and that sort of like bombed out, ruined environment that they're moving about in and skulking about in. I did want to say that, and so as you say, like as we finish this movie, I sort of finish the movie and I say, right, well, what am I going to take away from that? I'm going to take away Daleks Invasion Earth 2150. They conquered Earth, and you have presented that. But I wanted to say that, in terms of them sort of like not caring or not really thinking things through, the one quote that I've got to cite is, it's in that sequence as they've arrived at 2150 and they think, oh yeah, we should explain how it's bigger on the inside. And the Doctor says, just as time is regarded as the 4th dimension, space is the 5th dimension.
Yeah.
And I just think, oh my God, it's the 3 dimensions of space that makes time. The 4th dimension. You're the scientist who made this.
That was a real. I'm glad you mentioned that because I forgot. But that was a real stumper when he said that, because I thought the same. I'm like, no, like I thought exactly. I was like, no, like length, breadth, depth. They're the 3 dimensions that make up space. Like, yeah.
It's like, do you think the first 3 dimensions are like air, water, and earth or something?
Yeah.
Like what?
Yeah, I often treat people in their humoruses, fire, earth. Yeah, that was a bit of a stumper to me. And I think, like you said, it's littered with these things of dialogue and choices where you just go, oh, they don't give a monkeys, or they do, but like they're not enough, or they know enough that they're going to say something, but they're not going to research it. There's no one going to go back to like, pull out the Britannica, Encyclopedia Britannica, and go like, okay, what does actually this mean?
Well, I mean, look, let's not dignify this by calling it research, okay? We're talking about piloting, knowing that space is the first 3 dimensions, and piloting the Earth from a hollowed-out core, okay? There's silly. No research needed.
No, the whole purpose of that is silly, because again, you're like, well, why Earth? Like, we've got other actual. If you've actually got other planets in our solar system. You can have Mars. Like, we're not doing anything with it. Have it. there's a bit of that going on that I'm like, this feels ridiculous. But one of the final questions I want to get to, and it jumped to mind whilst I was watching this, because I then thought about, and we're not going to do it, but it keeps crossing my mind, is the 1990s TV movie that introduced Paul McGann as the sort of like the reboot Doctor, when they tried to introduce it as an American show.
American Doctor.
Yeah. But one of the things to think about, and I was curious, is could you ever do a full-blown Doctor Who movie? And would it have to be in canon?
Well, I mean, I'd like to see it. It's been talked about over the years. I certainly think that the revived show has done multi-part episodes and specials that I think, I mean, I've been to movie theaters and watched.
Have you?
Yes, I have.
I'd love to do that.
No, it's cool seeing, a Doctor Who special in a theater. Except when it's bad, and then you're like, oh, why did I do this? But no, that's quite cool. And I think that you could, I think of like the sort of, Davies finale and stuff like this. I think that would play quite well in a movie theater. And if you do it with a little better budget, great. And one of the things I love about Doctor Who is that it's all canon and they haven't done a hard reboot, even if there are contradictions along the way.
Yeah.
And I don't like that these two films are, non-canonical.
Well,
what about you?
There could always be an alternative version. Well, funny enough, the reason it popped into my head once I watched this, because I was thinking, like you said, this isn't canonical. This is a sidestep. It was done much like the Quatermass things. It was a BBC property that was then bought and made into an adaptation. And I was like thinking, are there others that have done that? And then I then watched Star Trek V, which in and of itself is a discussion we may have at some point in the future. I don't mind it. It's silly. It's got some real sort of things in it. Shatner doing Shatner. Shatner directing Shatner. So I was thinking that seems to me, though I was watching going, like, you had Star Trek and all the bits and pieces, then you had the motion picture, and then 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6, and so on. So you got to Generations. And then I was reading the trivia, and obviously 5 and 6 came out at the same time as Next Gen being on television.
Mm-hmm.
So you also got these two running treks. And again, that's not a hard reboot. It's sort of like, no, it's continue. It's just a jump forward in time. And so I was thinking, I was like, could you do that? Because technically you could have, people, there's writers that are clever enough. You could say, do you know what? We're going to do a movie with the David Tennant Doctor.
Right. Yeah, that would be the parallel.
This is just a story, but this story just happened in that iteration. And if you're clever enough, it can be like an isolated story, but you tell it over 2 hours. But you're going to give you a massive budget, and you're going to tell a 10th Doctor or any Doctor. Well, obviously not all of them. You couldn't pull, but I don't want a CGI. Well, you could do something shit like that where you could go, do you know what?
Moff Tarkin kind of.
We could do a Moff Tarkin and bring back Hartnell or Troughton and all of them, have them all on screen in one big go. Because they sort of did it with the 11th Doctor when they saved Gallifrey and all that and had them all the different TARDISes. Besides the point, but I was thinking, you could just go, do you know what? We're going to tell an 11th Doctor story. Happened in his regeneration. It's not. It doesn't impact the wider arc of that original Doctor, but it was this massive story that was told on this other planet. I would have it in space. I'd have it in time. And just have a really good adventure story, and just do something, but have a massive. It just felt like you could do that, and you could have right. We're going to now we do a 12th Doctor one or whatever.
I'll tell you what my problem is with that. It's that the idea of going back and inserting stuff into past Doctors.
Yes,
there's a tone and a feel to that material, and. If you went back and you did that, and I'm a sort of like continuity guy, and I'm a sort of like reading order guy. I'm a like editor by nature, and I think right. So that episode or that movie has to be placed between episodes. If you watch them in order, that's going to make,
Does it make
Battlestar
sense?
Galactica, the plan, look like it was well thought out. This is not what I want, because of, even though obviously there are, episodes going back to like the Three Doctors and stuff, as you said, all the TARDISes being there. That somehow feels okay. Like,
Yeah.
but it doesn't feel okay to me to go back and do that. But I think you could do it with the current Doctor. I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with a flabbergasting big episode.
One of the things I thought about, again, because I did think about that, and because I then thought, and this is another question, is like going back to, this is a side piece. Before it became a franchise, before it became a TV franchise, these films exist. And then, as you say, they've now got things like, there's the books, but more importantly than the books is the audio dramas.
Mm-hmm.
And I forget the name of the company that does them.
Big Finish.
Big Finish, thank you. And they've done all kinds of things that are in, and I will put in canon, but like exist outside of the TV universe. So if you want to understand sort of like I don't know, the more of the Ninth Doctor before he met Rose, or you want to know this and that, like, yeah, you can go and have those stories exist. Like, they've done that. Eccleston came back and did one, or Tennant did a bunch, or Matt Smith did a bunch. You've got those in place. And so could you do this? But you can ignore those in a way you probably couldn't ignore a film.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you're right, but it's literally coming up to the 60th anniversary very soon, next year, 2023. Is it 63? Am I right? 62 or 63?
Yeah, 63, because it
63,
was
yeah.
right around Kennedy's death that premiered.
Yeah, you're blaming Doctor Who. Okay. That's a conspiracy theory I've not heard yet. But yeah, you could have that as like the 60th anniversary. Like, yeah, we're going to go big budget. Like, we're going to do, because one of the things that's been suggested is, and I think the BBC may even do this, is that have a big blowout and then have a break again for a couple of years. Let it stew for a bit. I don't know. We'll see. But I would love that with Davies coming back, have a new Doctor, and then just have like a big budget international released film. I think you would be crazy, almost crazy not to, because what you're doing is, if it's well done and you give it a load of money, it could introduce new fans. It would take you back to classic Doctors. It would introduce you to the new Who, everything. It just feels like a bit of a no-brainer. But
well, I mean, I'd like to see that for the anniversary, and it might be a good way of launching, the revived Davies thing.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think that it's possible that what they need is to rebuild and go through a period of rebuilding. And Davies has talked about, and apparently the BBC is interested in sort of building a shared universe.
Mm-hmm.
Torchwood kind of ended on a cliffhanger. I'd love to see more of that.
I enjoyed. I love Torchwood. I thought it was.
I do too.
It was good fun. That.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of hit or miss, but about half of it is damn good.
Yeah.
And I'd love to see more of that. I think that Davies can come up with. I mean, you could do a series long thing with the Doctor's daughter, which was never followed up on. Except in audio stuff. But I mean, you could do all of that, and then you could build back up, and maybe for the 65th anniversary or something, do the crossover, like big coming
Movie
out
version.
thing.
Yeah. It'd be interesting. I think it's something worth thinking about. It just because the other thing that I just remembered, the BBC don't have full ownership of Doctor Who. The BBC have full distribution, and I think something else to do with merchandising. However, Bad Wolf is the name of the production company, and Bad Wolf was bought up by someone in the last 12 months. They were bought by Sony.
Oh, really?
Yes. And that's a very interesting sort of thing. So Sony technically owns. You could have Spider-Man appearing in Doctor Who. Just saying. But Sony, they are looking for their. They keep saying they're looking for. They're either out. They're either going to be out of the movie business, or they're looking for their big franchise.
Besides Spider-Man.
Besides Spider-Man, that's why Ghostbusters came back. That's why they've done other things with Venom and Mobius, Morbius, all this kind of stuff. They're looking for it. Wouldn't surprise me,
Yeah, I don't know how much confidence I have, but it would be interesting.
Mm.
And there's a lot of. I mean, the other thing is, I think that. I mean, I don't know, because Doctor Who. I don't know how you pitch Doctor Who to, to the Chinese, right? I mean, how do you say, okay, it's a very, very British alien who flies around in a 60s style police box. What is a police box?
I don't know. I think you're wrong. I think this is where, this is where you find the marketing. And you've hit the nail on the head. Like, there's a charm factor to this. Like, the Japanese in particular love all this. They are big sci-fi nuts. They will grab hold of things and do amazingly bizarre things. Like, and I think there's. I mean, I would not be surprised if there isn't quite a strong Doctor Who fan base in Japan anyway. Like, that I can imagine it doing well over there. Maybe other parts of Europe might, thingy. But like, I think you'd be wrong. I think you could sell this in that weird way. Keep your British doctor, and get someone with have a sexy doctor, right? Seriously, think Bond.
Sexy doctor.
Hashtag my sexy doctor. Get someone with a bit of sex appeal, but or quirky, but think how the hell did they sell Harry Potter? James Bond's slightly different, but it could be that same thing as Harry Potter, but you bring in a couple of notes for the film version, that one outing you have, bring in some big names. Have your doctor be whoever it's going to be, your sexy doctor and their companion, and then you bring in some big names. For that adventure, you are going to have, I don't know. I can't think of anybody, celebrities right now, but like, who's hot right now, that would do well,
Idris Elba, right?
Yeah,
wanted to be Bond.
Yeah, bring in. Have him play a Bond-like character in the film. You could do all kinds of things.
Or be a one-off doctor. For
yeah. You could do these kinds of things. There was so much opportunity to do things, or have him play like a Gallifreyan. Mm-hmm. If you want a shared universe, he's not going to be the Doctor, but he can be another Gallifreyan.
I do think that the Gallifreyans are, I mean, they've been used well here and there. I have problems with their depiction and how often Gallifrey gets destroyed and brought back. But
just as much as London seems to get invaded somehow.
Yes, and all aliens really love destroying Big Ben, in Parliament. That's their number one target. Yeah, I mean, I do think that you could do a Gallifrey, like a more hard sci-fi Gallifreyan thing, and let the Doctor be a sort of quirky Guardians of the Galaxy-ish, yes, it's a police box, but it's Guardians.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying do like a James Gunn kind of thing, but Guardians of the Galaxy would be a really good, example of how that's how I'd sell it to the execs. Mm-hmm. Oh, it's going to be a British Guardians of the Galaxy. That's what we're going to do. Think Harry Potter, but in Guardians of the Galaxy, and they'll be like, "Oh, money."
Yeah, see, no, that's the pitch. You should be a pitch guy, because that's the pitch.
Right. Anyway, I think we've wrapped up. I wanted to talk about that because I thought this felt like an opportunity to talk about that sideways angle for Doctor Who before we go back into the TV shows.
Well, and this movie is a glimpse of a different period in Doctor Who history where, where Doctor Who was still new. There was still one Doctor. And so if you're going to adapt it, you recast. There's nothing wrong with making him a human who's just a scientist and getting on with the story. And having that story feed this sort of fad for Daleks, Dalek mania, that, we forget now. I mean, I think that we think of Doctor Who as Doctor Who, but I mean, Doctor Who was Doctor Who, and the Daleks really, I mean, it was that serial that took off and made Doctor Who.
Yeah. Wouldn't be surprised if, if you really wanted to hit that 60s zeitgeist, The Beatles riding Daleks through London, I think, would have been exactly what you wanted to see. Okay, yes, but you're right. This is the time, and I like the fact this has taken some of those sideways, because it's hard to do with the rest. But this felt like a good area to sort of explore that sideways universe for the Doctor.
I want to skip the Beatles. Can we just go back to like the Dalek invasion, say 1997, and do the Spice Girls movie?
And even better, yeah. They sing at such a pitch that the resonance destroys the Daleks.
There you go. God. The end of like Mars Attacks, or like Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. Yeah.
Yep. Perfect. There you go. I've saved the franchise. Right. Anyway, we are moving on with Doctors. We're going to move into this. We've now sort of done the first, generation, this first iteration of Doctor Who. Of course, sort of like Hartnell did suffer from because of his age and his lives, and they did replace him with Troughton. What's his first name? God damn it! I'm going to have to double check.
No, that was later. That was
Patrick Troughton.
Right.
He sort of joined in 65, so he'd actually already started, because this film came out in 66, so they actually already had the regeneration. It was 66. Yeah, so 66. So he moved on to become Troughton in 66, same year this came out. So we are going to be going next to the Macra Terror. Now, what I will say is this is going to be an interesting one. So we are going to be covering some of this stuff off, because the Macra Terror technically doesn't exist. The video for it, for the vast majority of it, was lost, but the audio remained and was polished up, and they did an animated redo of it that has been released. And so this is obviously regarded as one of the Troughton best stories, but also allows us to go back and look at one of these lost series and how they restored it. And I think that's another good thing to see about how these series have been restored from us, because these things were lost. They were never maintained. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that. I know nothing about this next one or the animation, so it's going to be quite exciting to see, I think.
I haven't seen this either. I have seen some of these animations. Yeah, it is Patrick. Where I feel like we just lost all Doctor Who respect. But yeah, no, I mean, I have seen some of these animations, and a lot of the Second Doctor stuff is disproportionately missing. But yeah, and it was September, it was November. The end of the 10th Planet is 29 October 66. The first regeneration.
Yeah. So this goes into 66. We're into 67 now. So we're going into that sort of between 67 or 66 and 69 is the Patrick Troughton years. So yes. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on our trip in the TARDIS. We're going to be maintaining this into the next episode. But if you like what we're doing, and or you want to tell us that you have lost all respect for us and our Doctor Who knowledge, please go onto your podcast catcher and leave a review. Any number of stars, preferably 5, and it helps us in all the charts and gets us sort of noticed by more and more people. But if you really like what we're doing, please check out our Patreon, patreon.com/20CG Media. There'll be a link down below in the notes. And on that, Julian and I do a Twilight Zone, Trekking Through the Twilight Zone podcast, episode by episode, going through those original Rod Serling episodes, and we'll continue off to all the others as well, doing all kinds of things where they were remade and talking about every single one. I also do a 30-minute thoughts a month, and I get creators in on a quarterly basis to talk about their art and their creations, which is a fascinating conversation. But ladies and gentlemen, as always, thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you at some other time and space. Thank you very much.